Hello, welcome back. Tonight I will speak about a book of mine, a novel called Shérézade or Shérézade. You know, her name sometimes is written differently. Sometimes Shérézade, sometimes Shérézade with the first two E with this accent, so to say. And it is very older story now that appears, that it is very known as well, and I wanted to write a novel about Shérézade, and this is a playlist where I speak about the book, me as a writer, or how I wrote my book, how the book of Shérézade appears now. As I've said, it is a novel. It means that it has, a story, different characters. There is a lot of ambience, a lot of descriptive. The novel is in general descriptive, and it carries, of course, a story, or has very storyline with a beginning, middle, and end. It has a specific form for it to be a novel, but it has to have, of course, literally and artistic qualities to it. Novels do have a certain level, that makes the novel be a good novel. So, I said the description of the ambience, of that place or of that part, of that history, of the storyline as well. They're all connected in some way or another. Everything, under the name of Shérézade. And Shérézade is a princess. She is a typical princess because she travels. She's a traveler, and we see her on the cover. It is Shérézade, the way I envisioned her in my book, as a traveler, as a woman that has traveled many regions on her mule, which is like a horse and a donkey, a mule. It is very strong. It's very important to why a mule. But sometimes she travels as well on the camel, it depends on the travel. If you go through the desert, you need the camel, but Shérézade has a mule. So there is always a difference to her than to the others. Wherever she goes, she is, remembered, or she is seen, or she talks with others as well, or she is observed, in the meaning that she attracts some type of attention. There is something about her, it can be her beauty, she has black hair, very intense black eyes, she does carry a specific beauty, that contrasts with her white skin. At the same time, the fact how she appears, one can see there is something about her that does not need words, or even in the silence. She carries that with her. It's something innate. Something innate means something born with. And of course, those aspects too are shown on the outside as well, So the people are able to feel something, or able to, they also see her in a specific light, and that light is correct, There is something about Shérézade. And that aspect of something, what means something, what that means when I say there is something about her, she is a loner, so she travels always by herself, So that, of course, carries some type of difference to her than to the others, For example, if she passes through a market, like in the old times where they had the open temples, very high temples, open, made out of stone, and there will be, of course, people or markets, and she would cross, or on her mule, or on her camel as well. People will have observed her, They will have, of course, seen her, and they will have, feel something specific about her, the way she looks or the way she appears. There is a certain quietness that comes with Shérézade. It is her personality or her character, she does not speak if it is not necessary, and that's quite interesting because her talent is the talent of storytelling. Yes, of course, the storyteller is a very good teller and is very good with words, or speaks a lot, or can speak a lot, but to be a good storyteller, or to have that innate quality of it, actually it is the opposite. to receive that, you have to be very quiet, or be able to move slow, or say be in that element of quietness. Quietness is not passiveness. She's not passive. She is present, she is active, but she is silent, she is observing, she is learning, she is, to say, if the people are seeing her, she is still seeing the people, no? So she walks through that market, or she rides through that market at a slow pace, no? To say, well, Shérézade feels herself part of the people, no? It is something that she loves, and maybe in her travels, sometimes she travels long periods where she does not see any humans or any people, no? There are places like that. So there is a instinctive joy, no? Or we say the fact that she moves slowly tells us that she enjoys that place very much. She takes her time. She wants to be there longer. So it is something of her goodness as well, that of course people are able to observe about her, no? At the same time, you say, well, Shérézade is not only riding, say, well, just because she's a traveler, it's just that interesting about her. Say, what is the motive of her travel? Is she searching for something specific? Or in general? No, it is something about her. We say it is a part that we do not know. We say who truly Shérézade is, or how her story developed. To say, well, if she's a princess, it means that she was born as a princess. That means that she has, of course, a very beautiful home, or there is something about that, or her past, no? That she left behind, and she, through her travels, she used to say, chose a different life. Of course, she didn't change. Shérézade, say, it's always Shérézade, no? It is not to say, no, she is not a princess, no. Shérézade is princess, but to say, she has chosen a life outside, no? A life that, how to say, gives her something that is part of her love towards something, no? Or she is searching for something as well. So the element of Shérézade to say, is to say almost like she carries something in her heart that it is private, or it is something that she holds on to it, or there is a place maybe that she wants to reach as well, no? To say maybe there is a goal to her journey. It is not only for the purpose of, there is something that comes her way as well, no? There is something that arrives at a certain place in her journey as well, no? And that is, say, what the book develops further on with her arriving at the palace, no? And so, well, that palace, she has never been there, so say it is an invitation for her to meet the emperor in the palace and tell him stories. So that means that Shérézade is known in her life, say, through who she is, no? Through her journey as well, as someone who is a very good storyteller as well, or it is something that she knows, no? Or she is able to do. So that's the entrance of the book, where my story starts, and they say it is that element of Shérézade, the description of that time that she has passed with the emperor, with the element of her being in the palace and telling the stories as well, and the beautiful stories that I have chosen for Shérézade to tell the emperor as well, no? So the text, it's almost like the text sometimes writes its own text, or I have to write more than one text, no? It depends how the storyline is, or how the book is as well. So the beginning part of the novel, no, is this journey of her, let's say, the representation of her. And that may seem simple, but it is not, because the beginning of the book has to set the tone of the book, and the character has to be represented correctly. So it's like the first chapter writes the book, no? So the first chapter is a little bit more challenging to write, no? Because you have to present the character, you have to present the atmosphere, and you have already to present the story as well. For a novel. If it is not a novel, there is something else, no? It is not necessarily in this order. But for a novel, I said there are certain strict rules to make it a novel. And then the story develops in the main part, which is always the middle, which is the largest part. So the book is the middle, no? And we have the introduction of the story, and then comes the real story, and that's the story of Shérézade, no, with the emperor, to say, with the second character. In the same time, when we think about characters, we say, well, okay, Shérézade is the main character, and the emperor is not the main character, no? To say it is not strict. Sometimes it moves. Sometimes the main character becomes someone else, or it can change, or or maybe the main characters have the same main character appeal. Maybe both are main characters, no? At least in my book, to say I see them very equal, no? So the representation of that, of course, there are differences. That's the interesting aspect. So well, they are from two very different worlds. In the same time, the interesting aspect of her origin speaks that she is already a princess, so she knows already how to be in the court or at the palace. No, she knows that world. It's almost like she goes somehow back to her origin in some way or another. And so the emperor does not know that about her. No, he does not know anything about Shérézade besides that she tells very beautiful stories. They do not know each other before. So of course the first meeting, no, it is sets to the atmosphere or the elements of their relation, of what is between these two characters. That's so interesting. And of course then the story is developed in the middle part. That is the most, the introduction, the main part in a novel can be short or a little longer, depends, but the middle part is always the longest. And then in a novel we have the final, the conclusio, there is the third part as well, but it does not have to be a necessary conclusion of the story, no? It is more like the third part is more like a feeling that the book gives, So one gets to know the characters better, and there is a more deeper, intimate meaning to the story as well. Something is created through that story as well. No, the third part is a little bit more open, or more, it has to have the element of the interesting as well. No, the third part, even if it is the end of the book, it still has to keep the story very at the same level. No. Even if it somehow opens or leaves the story, we are closing towards the end of the book, but in novels, the end, has this more open type of feeling, that the book still carries that story of the beginning. There is still some type of things that we don't know. There is still something left unsaid. It is that feeling, as open book or the open end. But it is not I think differently how I create my novels, because there's almost like the middle part should not repeat itself. No, the middle part should remain almost untouched, because that's like the main book, and the beginning has to be very descriptive. No, so the reader has to understand who is where and what. No, there's this questioning too, and then it can be shown in a beautiful, inviting way to the story as well, as the storyteller knows. There is like the beginning of telling a story. There is certain preparation that comes before that story begins, because before the storyteller can tell the story. There is need of a certain atmosphere. There is need of something around that the storyteller can begin to tell the story. So that invitation that she receives is her ability, or her the element of the yes, the element of her accepting. It's almost like a challenge. So Shérézade has, as I said, as a princess, she is well educated, very beautiful, and she has a very soft and intellectual understanding, of many things. through her travels, Shérézade has heard many stories, or has read many stories as well, no? And she is able to tell those stories, and those very interesting stories as well. So it is to say, even the character has to prove himself or herself, no? So, well, the element of the questioning when one reads a book, or one writes a book too, no? And the element of interesting, it does not necessarily has to happen like a big thing, no? The feeling sometimes is said in șoapte in Romanian, in whispers, no? It does not have to be loud. It does not have to be. To say there is a certain atmosphere that the emperor offers her, the ability for her to tell the stories to him. No, there's an acceptance on both sides, and that's the interesting aspect. Is we don't know how Shérézade tells her stories. No, it's interesting to see that. At the same time, there is a seriousness that comes to Shérézade. You know, she's not a foolish princess. She's not a foolish girl. No. And it is very clear that it is never said, well, she's a traveler, it means that she has this personality, or maybe she's like very free, and because she travels means that she don't like people, or because she travels means that, you know, there's something wrong with her, maybe. Say no. Shérézade, as I've said, is princess, you know, so the element of the princess does not mean that she is it's almost to say, does not have to fit any description necessarily. It is, she does not present herself as a princess. That tells us something about her, no? And to say, well, if she's princess, say, why she did not stay princess in the meaning, no? It's like she did something wrong, or she chose something that was not for her. She chose something else, no? So it's like a little critique, maybe, you know. So if maybe people see her, it's like the element of not knowing, no. It is a little confusing, but there is something that we don't know about her. And that element to say, well, it is not, maybe that's to say, Shérézade does not communicate often or does not speak. It is more to say, she speaks when she tells her stories. And that is her, to say, that's her gift, or that's the part that she gives of herself in that moment. And it is, to say, a very a joyful and a very open and very sweet way that how she is able to carry those stories, or to carry that interest of the emperor, no, through her stories. It is not to say, well, we say when one tells a story, no, one has to include the other as well. One has to be able to keep that interest, to keep that story going at the same time, no? So the part of Shérézade is her own understanding of those elements as well, no? To say, even if it is not obvious, even if it's to say we do not know this, or we do not think that, or we are not sure about her, no? Shérézade, say, proves herself, no, worthy. This, say, the character proves worthy, no, of that aspect of her as well. Let's say, well, it is an important aspect of Shérézade, but it's not the only aspect of her personality. It is not only that, no. You do not to say, well, she's a good storyteller. Story is closed. It is maybe not that interesting, no. That how one keeps element of the interesting as well. So it's almost to say the storyteller can go by it in the wrong way, or the storyteller is not able to adjust the story as well, because does not know necessarily how the emperor is and what is allowed, or, you know, there is a almost like a difficulty in the beginning as well, a little bit awkward, you know, like the first moment, no, of the meeting. There is something that when they do not know each other before, and to say that's the beauty of Shérézade, no? Because she's able, through her being the way she is and the way she tells the story, to clear that out and to be able to create a very beautiful atmosphere through her stories, no? And that, to say, develops the story further on, no? That's the beautiful aspect that comes then later in the book, or say in the middle part. And then in the end, or the story of Shérézade, no? So when she stays a few nights or a few days at that place by telling the emperor the stories, say every night, no? And then she then travels away, or travels back, no? Or she goes somewhere else, no? It is to say, that's to say the end book, or the open end, because we do not know, no? Say, well, Shérézade, say, does know what is required of her, and then she goes on her travels further on. So the book shows us a part of Shérézade, no? That's why to say we do not know. It is not a book about all her life. It is a book only about this part of what the story is and what happened, or her days there at the palace with the emperor. But to say the story of Shérézade is a longer one, no? To say she has been before in other places, and then she will travel then further on other places, not saying if she will be or she will come back to that place or not. We do not know that, no? So that's an example of an open end, but the open end does not necessarily even have to give an explanation. Sometimes open ends are just the book end, no? There is not necessarily need to explain the end of a book. I don't understand necessarily the meaning of explaining the end, because they say, well, we do not know. They say it is a part, we say no, but it is still interesting. That's why the element of the interesting has to appear in the last part of the book or the novel, or it has to give something. Meaning like a feeling or an idea, or something that fits the story as well, no? Or it can be something more abrupt. It is a set depending on the writer as well, what chooses for that moment. But it has to be something that is interesting, explained, or something given, even if it's something in a little form, no? So the end, of course, is important in any book, and I like to say to read the end of the books. It is interesting too, as say how the story ends, no, or what are, say, the last words or the last sentences, or with what the reader is left with, no. It's that element that something can, still one can still discuss, no. Say, well, if it's open, one can still discuss, even if it's closed. There are ends where the story is closed. There's a certain very clear thing, no, but the open end leaves that to the imagination. That's like the difference between. So the story of Shérézade, say, the beautiful part is the representation of the story. It is not necessarily only the story or the storyline that I somehow explained, but it has to be the entire book has to, have a certain flavor, or have a certain beauty to it as well. Through the text, through the words, through the scenes, through the description or representation, through the words, through the feeling for it, no? And that's the work of the storyteller as well, no? So Shérézade does not only tell each night a story or some stories, she creates an ambience and nuance, and she somewhat develops those stories, and the stories are connected with one another. It is not the second time is different. She's able to, there's a interesting development of her stories as well, no? And there's a beautiful connection too between Shérézade and the emperor. There's a beautiful representation of them, of their personalities too, or how to say, that comes through the text, no? They say that has to be, shown through the text. It has to almost like develop itself through the text. It is not that I'm writing, for example, descriptive means Shérézade has blue eyes and 2 legs and her skin, no. It is shown through the words, through the story, no? And part of the representation does not even have to be physical to to give the feeling of Shérézade, how she is, no? It's like, how can I say the novels in general are not that large books can be, but if there's a shorter novel, one has to be creative in how to represent those aspects in maybe a few lines or a few pages, no? Because the interest is the story, not so much there are novels too, of course, where that part is very, very descriptive. There it's more, to say, a descriptive type of novel. But I think the poetic and the literal aspect improves when one does that, no? Because it leaves room to the imagination as well. Because descriptive does not mean that I describe everything to perfection. It's like, it would be so boring if I don't leave anything to the imagination. You present the character in a different way. This aspect of the storyteller as well. To say, if I have a cloth and I want to sew, I want to make a design, it is not enough, oh, I have the needle and the colors and I will just sew something, no? I want it to make it beautiful, it has to have a beautiful pattern, or I change the colors. No, it is a very exact work of Shérézade when she tells the story. The stories have to be exact, the stories have to be true, no? Or carry those elements in the story as well. So I say, well, Shérézade does have very beautiful part of herself, no, that she shows us through the storytelling, but there is nothing to say it's almost to say like she does leave things unsaid in some way or another, no, through her departure or through that element of her being the element of the traveler, no. It is something that she enjoys, or something she gives to herself as well, no? Or it is something that she seeks, or she likes that part of her life and that connection that she has, no? Or that she has built for herself, or that element of her own personality as well. So there is always a element of some type of closeness, and at the same time a little distance when it comes to Shérézade, no? And that is beautiful, that is correct, that is part of who she is and how she is. And the element of the storytelling is the most important part for Shérézade. Or say the stories that she tells have a meaning, or the stories that she tells have something beautiful in them as well, that she wants to share or likes to share, or is seeking to as well different maybe artifacts or objects. There is something, you know, it's almost like speaking about her passions, or the things she likes, or the things she enjoys to see or do, or you know, even the element of the market, maybe something that she likes to travel through temples, or through the element of the desert, the element of the where, you know, all artifacts exist, or all things exist, as maybe the pyramids or places that she discovers, no, as well. To say she is a free traveler in the meaning that she knows where she is, she knows where she goes, no, but she enjoys an element of that freedom that part brings with her as well. Then we have the element of preparation when it comes to Shérézade, so she is always very well prepared, and that this element of important, what I say when she is princess, I do not say she is princess only for the beautiful idea of a beautiful word that is or means, to say that brings a certain type of qualities to her as well. If she will not be princess, she will not be Shérézade, you know. It is part of her lineage, it is part of her honor, and it is part of who she is. That does not change, no? Shérézade is princess, or Shérézade is, I say Shérézade, no? It is the story of her, or a part of her story, as I said, but one of course can imagine other things around her thematic or her personality. It is a part that, you know, carries different aspects of her personality that I find very beautiful, and the qualities of the storytelling abilities of Shérézade as well her intelligence, or the aspect of her being a traveler, the element of searching, of learning, the element of education, the element of the connection that she feels or sees, or the things that she seeks or takes refuge as well. In the meaning of she is able to share with others something that it is inside her, very beautiful, but at certain times, as the storyteller knows, there's certain times when that is possible. So I do invite you, of course, to read the novel of Shérézade or the book of Shérézade. I think it's a very beautiful book and interesting story as well. And there is other recordings where I speak about her, and I will continue to speak other recordings as well. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, bye.